All right. Welcome to episode 81 of the Jake Blanchard podcast. Today, my guest is my dear friend, Josh Schlaich. I've known this guy for about 15 years, which is crazy to me. We've crossed paths personally, musically, professionally, and he's one of those people that I'm just better for knowing. So I'm excited that he agreed to come on. He's currently the director of product marketing at Signify Health. So I'm sure we'll talk about the healthcare industry and business in general, music, fatherhood, and so much more. Josh, welcome to the podcast, my man. Love having you.
Thank you, my friend. It is great to see you, number one, even though it's virtually. And yeah, man, I cannot believe it's been like 15 years that we've been together. It's starting at little old Boise State University. It might as well have been called Boise Community College at that point because it was a lot smaller than it is now.
Isn't that the truth, man? It's crazy. I'll drive by the university. You know, right after I graduated, they built that gigantic business building of of sorts, and so it's like I just remember being in like these multi-purpose buildings scattered across campus, and now they have these like huge facilities with stock tickers like modeled after Stanford's XYZ. I'm like,
crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I mean, I remember the old business building. Anybody of your listeners have gone to Boise State, had like barely air conditioning. Oh, yeah. And it was these, church pews of seats that were, you could sit in them for 5 minutes and you'd probably have a sciatica problem.
God, we sound like old men right now. I remember I was getting sciatica.
Coca-Cola was 25 cents.
Yeah,
yeah, man, it's changed so much. I think for the better. I mean, I'm super proud of being an alma mater there. I mean, it's grown like crazy. It's awesome.
Yeah.
But I mean, and I know we'll get into some stuff, but the fact that so much about the education experience has changed too, just through the pandemic, is nuts. But
yeah,
we can get into that.
Yeah, no, let's dive into it now, man. I think that like when we talk about universities in general, or like just kind of the pattern interrupt that we've had of like this experience that you're excited to have, like I'm going to get the college experience, or I'm going out into the working world and now I'm getting this experience to grow my career, and you're kind of expecting it to be a certain way. And then, obviously it's dynamically different. I think we've all kind of had the opportunity to reflect on the status quo or the previous system. But I think enough time now has passed where starting to miss some of those things, those human interactions, the institutional experience, if you will.
No, it's true. And part of, I mean, I know that you did your grad program, and I have done grad program as well, 2 of them, which is not recommended, by the way, just purely out of tuition costs alone. But
and pain.
Yeah, and pain. But part of it was that interaction you have, and sort of being able to discuss conceptual ideas face to face with people, and to see firsthand people's number one, their knowledge growth, but also their character growth, and how you learn and change and grow. But I can't imagine being right now doing an online only, or having limited interaction with your peers. I actually now work remotely 100% of the time. I fortunately get to travel and interact with people quite a bit that way. But I will say there's something that is a piece missing, whether it be education or work, with not being in the same room and ideas flying and whiteboards covered in scribbles. So I don't know. It's just a different world than was 2 years ago, even.
Yeah, I find I have such an appetite for in-person collaboration right now, and I actually have a relationship with a company in downtown Boise, and I've been finding myself making the drive like more than once a week. Because originally I was like, I'm just going to do it once a week. Now I'm going 2 or 3 times a week just to be sitting in these conference rooms with whiteboards all around and like solving problems together. It's it's an itch that I have the opportunity to scratch right now, but one that I didn't anticipate that I would ever gravitate back to.
And that's the other interesting thing. I'm actually an introvert, personality type, if you believe in those things. But I even was thinking, is there you have this entire social component that is now gone or otherwise very limited. How much can we recreate as a society virtually that sort of capacity and capability, or is there nothing that will ever be a substitute for being in person? And I keep thinking to myself that there's, the pendulum has swung one way towards complete, remote work. Will it come back the other way, or will it completely transform forever? I don't know.
Yeah, it'll be weird that the trend will be in person working, the subculture, the hipster, the hipsters work in person, as opposed to like what everyone else is doing in this kind of like remote working ecosystem, at least for technology workers or folks who are consultant based or whatever.
Dude, the next gen hipsters are going to be wearing suits just to
I
be
think,
ironic.
I think so, dude.
I think the other way around. It's going to be completely flipped. It's going to be great.
Yeah. Oh no, that's a scary thought, but one that I would not be surprised if it came true. But you've been in
it. Wearing fedoras at my house. It's always fedoras, and I just shaved my handlebar mustache. It's gone.
Oh man.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, not at all. I as we're starting at this point in time, just kind of talking about like communications. I mean, that's a world that you're very close to, something that you spent the time studying, those degrees you mentioned earlier, mostly around the idea of communication or marketing or those types of things. You also had a very long career in the broadcasting space, which is why I'm so excited to have a gentleman of your caliber on the podcast right now.
Much credit there for sure.
But man, what got you interested in communications? And then you maybe hit the top of the waves here on some of the roles that you've found yourself in over the years, supporting organizations.
Sure. So I actually wanted to be a news, actually a sports anchor. I wanted to be one of those guys on ESPN that was announcing sports games when I was younger.
Were you a big sports fan when you were a kid?
Yeah, to a certain extent. I have not as much like carried that into adulthood. I try to catch sports when I can, but it's limited.
Yeah, but, your pops was a football coach, right?
He was, and I mean, as much as that also taught me about life. Just being involved in sports, and so I think that there are a lot of lessons that can be learned generally in life, in business, et cetera, just by being a part of sports. And I think maybe that's part of what attracted me to sports in the first place. But I wanted to, be the guy who was at the games and doing the reporting and being on, camera and all of that stuff, even though I was an introvert. I think part of it was, it made me really uncomfortable. And I've always kind of been attracted to things that make me a little bit uncomfortable. And so eventually when I got out of high school, I found a job at a newspaper, and I was a sports writer for a little bit. I found a radio station that I went to go work at. It was a small town radio station. So here I was, like 19 years old, introducing oldies music on a radio station in some small town in Oregon, right? So from there, moved to Boise, went to Boise State for an undergrad and a grad program, and worked my way up through media. So I worked for a pretty large media conglomerate, included newspaper, radio, television, doing marketing and promotions and communications. And I also kept the on-air side. So I had done a lot of on-air work, mostly in radio.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of fun. So I got to, meet rock bands and do that sort of thing. But I also was able to develop my career at the same time in doing marketing and promotions and whatnot for TV, radio, and all of these traditional media outlets, as well as some of the new emerging spaces in web and app development. At the time, it was really nascent, and the media industry in particular was completely new to them, and they didn't know what to do with it. And it was not something they were all too freaked out about. I had a job at one point where I was manager of non-traditional revenue, which is just like laughable now, because non-traditional revenue, that's most of where, if you're a news organization, your revenue is going to come from that digital side. It's laughable to say that that's non-traditional anymore. But anyway, the media industry did not adapt. I think there were a couple of problems that I ran into as a professional generally in pursuing, further career growth in that industry. First was they couldn't adapt to the changes in technology. I think there have been a few really big outlets that have adapted, that have learned how to create novel content, be authentic, be real. There are others yet that, and we can talk a little bit more about this, that have actually found their niche content, and have either, produced really, really good stuff. On the other side, you have some really bad actors too that have produced really, harmful information and platforms and that sort of thing. But then, the other issue with the media industry generally, and the way that it was structured, and to a certain extent today is still structured in the traditional outlets, is it's hard to find meaning in what you're doing when you're helping everything from a car company to a beer advertiser to whatever else, right? Somebody trying to sell bicycles. You can never quite dig in and really get to know an industry well and learn what your impact is on the world. It's sort of fleeting. So that's why I moved into healthcare. So I took and adapted my skill set from media and my knowledge in communication as I was developing, getting education in the communication realm, and adapted that to the healthcare space. It was something that I completely didn't understand at all when I got into it. But they brought me in to a local or regional health system, hospitals, medical group, a lot of physicians in Idaho, Oregon area, St. Alphonsus. And I worked my way up there, started taking on more digital strategy roles, started taking on some marketing and communications responsibilities, as well as public relations. And if you're a PR person or know a PR person, you'll likely talk to someone whose knowledge is a mile wide and about an inch deep.
Yeah.
But it's what I needed in order to start learning the healthcare industry. So I got exposure to a lot of different spaces across the healthcare environment.
Well, I want to put a pin in this right now and go back to something that you said a minute ago, which was like when you were talking about traditional, I think, media or broadcast media or whatever it is, you said you kind of like you lose a sense of the purpose or the impact on the world. And I find it so interesting the time that we're in, the communication vehicles or the containers that we consume media in, and the responsibility those organizations have for the content that is provided. And I think like what we see a lot of criticism toward Facebook right now is because they're a marketing platform, that all they do is they give people an opportunity to have a personal profile, but they're there for ad revenue and they're there for marketing and promotions and all those types of things.
Absolutely.
And it seems like they are trying to control the container.
Yeah.
I think in the same light that traditional media did with, you can't say these types of words, you can't curse, you can't, have these types of ads for cigarettes or, kind of whatever it is. So, somebody who's worked in both worlds and seen that evolution. I mean, I'd love your perspective on like what's going on with the delivery or the intent to deliver from some of these companies.
It is so hard because you essentially took a world where there was authority in certain whoever had a microphone and the ability to actually deliver a message through a mass mode of communication, like a TV or radio or what newspaper, whatever. The saying was always, you never pick a fight with somebody who buys ink by the barrel, right? So that was the old world where you actually had authorities, and those authorities employed people that for at least a period of certain number of decades felt as though they had a public responsibility to find truth, whatever that was. Now, there's lots of issues with that and sort of defining what truth is, but it evolved out of the problems that came from yellow journalism, that were people making things up or otherwise trying to stoke fear and anger and using divisiveness towards their end. And so now that you had this period of responsibility in journalism, and I think that there's some a little bit of that left. But what happened was all of a sudden you created these platforms that made the distribution of information easy for anyone. So now there's no rules. There's no rules besides you having internet access and having a computer or a phone for you to have the same platform that CBS does, or that NBC does. That's good in certain ways. It's the democratization of information and really a grassroots delivery of information. At the same time, those moral and ethical and societal structures we had around what was right to report, what people needed to know versus what they didn't, truth versus complete non-truth or lie, went away, or were otherwise not as important. So you have to take sort of the good with the bad. And now there's no, what entity could you point to that you say, well, these people are the ultimate arbiters of what truth is? I think, you go back to the 70s or the 60s or wherever, even the 80s, 90s, you could look at, a media outlet and say, yeah, those guys do news. I watch that in order to know what's going on in the world, or at least, part of what's going on in the world, what's important to me or what they think is important to me. Now you get lost in everything and you don't really know what's important. So it's really hard to make sense of your world. It's hard to separate truth from lie.
Yeah.
And I think that the rise of conspiracy, I've been really interested in conspiracy theories for many years, actually dating back to like 2004.
As have I. And you and I have had spirited conversations about all kinds of things.
These things take off is fascinating. But now everybody has a microphone. The old players still have a microphone, but they haven't quite figured out. There's been a couple that have figured out how to, sort of navigate this and make money. I think that that's why, marketing, people look at marketing and communications, and some people see moral and ethical issues with things like marketing, but I think that there needs to be a rise of ethical, or not a rise, but I should say a continuation and further development of the infrastructure around ethical communication, around what it means to be a good communicator and what it means to establish authority again, because it's really hard to do right now. Everybody's questioning even the established outlets to a great degree, saying, well, they're part of a big conspiracy, right? It's really interesting.
Well, there's the challenge here too is there's no carrot and there's no stick.
Yeah.
In fact, like there's a carrot going the other way to promote sensationalism and to fabricate or to extend truth, or like whatever you want to call it. But I mean, there's, how many articles have you read that the headline has nothing to do with what actually happened in the article? Yeah. And so all that clickbait, that's what people end up gravitating towards. So there's no incentive model for the mundane. And a lot of life is mundane. And I think we're caught in this cycle where we wanted everything to have some kind of like global impact or personal impact or community impact. And so we try to look for this like stretch of meaning in these things that were never intended to be what they've become. And how frustrating that is in the time where the technology has gotten to a point where we can literally do anything that we want. And we are so committed as a collective of designing our own demise through information and truth that we just will not be able to break free of, polarizing or topics that we make polarizing.
It's true. And the other thing I wonder is, are we ever going to be able to reconcile capitalism and true in truth and the delivery of truth and information and that sort of thing? Yeah. And I think there's something there. I think we can. It's really hard, but I think we can. We haven't been so good at it. I mean, you have some that sort of live in the middle, right? Where you're not totally beholden to an advertiser or your platform isn't totally, built around, to your point, sensationalism and the monetization of sensationalism. But that's existed for a long time. Advertisers, they'll take out an ad in this, that, or the other publication, and it's really, maybe there's not a direct effect on how that channel distributes information, but there's certainly some. And so how do you reconcile those two things moving forward? I think it's really hard.
Yeah, and I have to combat my perspective when I'm reading new information to me, because I have such I'm assuming that most people go through this, where it's like, I used to look at a piece of information and look at it as something that like I was going to read and then think about. But like, I'll read the first sentence and I'll either be like, oh, this is bullshit, or, oh no, this is probably right. Exactly. And then I'll read through it, and then like, I don't know, I'll just kind of like move on. I won't retain anything. I won't take it in. All I'm left with is this emotion that like some days I'm handed a lot of bullshit, and then some days I'm in my echo chamber and I'm right, but the world is still full of bullshit. So it's like, I don't know, man. It's a difficult thing. Like I hear people joke about going back to the days where you get 30 minutes of news a day, and then this, oh, that's just the way it was. And then you walk away and everybody goes to the bar and you're like, hey, did you hear Cronkite? Did you hear what's going on and such and such? And yeah.
Well, no, it's true. And I guess the other outgrowth of the problem in the way information is distributed today, it's incredible the good that has come from personalization of information, and the algorithms and the AI that has driven the personalization of information delivery. However, back as far as 2006, 2007, in my grad program in communications, we were looking at the bubble effect, which, as you probably are well aware, it's if you click on a certain piece of information that maybe leans a little bit left or a little bit right, that algorithm is going to start serving you more of that information. And eventually it serves you more and more extreme information.
Yeah.
And so it pushes you further off on either side. And then there's major cognitive dissonance when you see something in the middle, because you've been pushed so far out to one side or the other that something that's actually in the middle is just shocking to you. So it's really fascinating.
I've heard, I think there's a comedian, I think Rogan brings him up every now and then. His name's Ari Shafir. And Ari did this thing where all he did was look at cat videos, like animal videos, for a couple weeks, and it cleaned out his whole ethos of recommended material. So all he was getting was like chinchillas and cats and puppies and like the cutest animals. And like, he felt happier as a human being after sitting down and purposefully searching for things that the algorithm is then just going to kind of, that's what you want. That's what you get. And I think that's an important point for everyone to reflect on, which is like, look at your social media feed. And if that's what you're getting, that's what you want. That's what you're gravitating toward. That's what you're spending your time doing. It's giving you more of the things that you're feeding your brain with. And if it seems unhealthy when you reflect, it's probably time to go Google some cats.
Totally. It's a great point. Googling cats will always be a good bet, regardless of what's happening in your life. But I will say, I mean, generally, and I think that this is, in fact, I looked this up just again the other day. I've seen it 100 times, but I always look it up. Is there, there are media bias charts out there that are readily available from really well-respected institutions that say, all right, here's who leans which way. And, you probably want to stay somewhere in the center. To your point about like the half hour of news a day, maybe you limit your time. You try to choose someone maybe in the center of that. Maybe you try to expose yourself sometimes to both of the sides.
Yeah.
Try not to avoid victim to confirmation bias unless you're looking at, cats.
Or stop reacting to headlines. That's the other thing I started doing. Like a headline will come out, breaking news, and I'm like, I will be here when it is not breaking anymore. When it is fully broken and there's a plethora of information, that's when I'll show up, unless there's something tragic happening in my immediate area. There's nothing that I can do except for anticipate information that's unavailable and disappointing.
Yes, exactly. I'll tell you, man, so I was working at a healthcare system when the pandemic hit.
Yeah, absolutely. And you were doing like PR and marketing work as well. I want to talk about it. Let's go into that. Like, what was your
Yeah,
experience?
yeah. So I was at in around healthcare for a couple of years, and I guess about a year and a half. And it's a large health system. It's 25 hospitals or something. And so I was doing communications and marketing and that sort of thing. One of the most interesting things, though, was this piece around information and how you fight disinformation and how you, in particular, there wasn't great information anywhere because there was a lot of uncertainty. And so, as part of my role, it is a responsibility to be a public health communicator of sorts, making sure that you get out the right message at the right time. There are a lot of really unique and completely novel pressures that came from the pandemic that I had never experienced. I've been in healthcare for quite some time now and done a lot of PR and communications and the like. And never had I experienced so many differing opinions from internal and external stakeholders on what should be communicated and when. And it was an outgrowth of everyone was so uncertain as to what do we communicate here, what do we need to tell people, and what's right, because what we communicate now might save a lot of people or might cause major issues or might actually confuse everyone and reduce the amount of trust they have in us in the future. And it was probably the most challenging communications crisis. And I've had some doozies, but challenging communications crisis I've ever had to deal with in my career. It was a great learning experience, but I'll tell you, I don't think that, number one, I hope that the discipline of communications is more respected and more needed, and more now than ever. I think it is. But second, I also think that as communicators, we need to be better about what we do, think about the implications when we communicate or when we don't. And then, what point we start at and what point we don't. How behavioral psychology plays into how we communicate. Not just that we relay hard data, but that how we relay that hard data really does matter in either confirming or otherwise causing cognitive dissonance with the person receiving it. And so how do you convince someone to do a specific health action, for example, without running into political beliefs now? And that's a really hard thing to do from a health communication standpoint. And you even have people that disagree internally on what should be included in that communication and what shouldn't. So again, it's just really fascinating to see how the outgrowth of media and how the democratization of information plays into where we're at today.
Do you believe that organizations that have communications departments, specifically healthcare organizations like hospitals and health systems, during COVID, underestimated I would say, the opinions that people would have on medicine, the structure of medicine, the way things are treated, like the information being so available where you can like look it up and see 20 different perspectives on how to treat something. And then you can walk into your doctor and say, no, I want this way. I want that way. Like, do you feel like hospitals and health systems knew that that was going to happen? Or do you kind of feel like this was one of those things that was like a major learning point that there's, because that information is available through so many different channels, it's going to make your job in communications that much harder to anticipate objection handling, for instance?
Oh, it's a great point. Yeah, it's a good question. I think that it didn't just impact the communications areas either. It was, everybody across the healthcare delivery system, and even, the health insurance side as well. They were all affected. I think that there was recognition that there was an increasing, medicine generally, in the way that it's communicated, in the way that relationships were developed. I'm not saying this is bad, but it's just was different. It was pretty paternalistic, right? So, we're the experts, and we're going to tell you what's happening with you or with this population of people. This is how healthcare works, right? This is how your health works. And I think to a large degree, that was warranted, and I think to a certain degree is still warranted. These people spend decades training on this stuff, learning new things. They're scientists. They look at the right data. They know how to interpret things that are very highly complex, and they're just very well trained. At the same time, that's not how necessarily people want to be communicated to anymore. They feel like that now. People feel like they have a voice. They also feel like, right or not, I think it's contextual, but they also feel like, well, I can find the information just as well as you can.
Yeah.
I can interpret that data just as well as you can. In some instances, they might be right. Or in some instances, they deserve to be heard as an advocate for themselves. In other instances, they might be totally wrong.
Yeah.
And the medical professionals might be right. And certainly that's based on context. But I do think there was a recognition in the medical field that and they called it the rise of consumerism and the rise of, self-advocacy. And there was a lot of different names for it. But at the end of the day, it was people, having access to more information than they've ever had before, creating both confusion and overconfidence, maybe in their Dunning-Kruger might be a maybe insulting way to put that. I don't mean it that way, but some people, they know more than they do. But also there was a whole positive aspect to that as well, which is they were now able to advocate for themselves more than they ever had before. There were communities of people discussing online their health issues, discussing new things and new ways of thinking. And I think so as much as there was positive, there was negative, and there was recognition of that. The COVID pandemic drastically accelerated that trend.
I can't help, with my own personal experience here, feel like there is, in the same vein of that paternal aspect of the hospitals and health system, also a medical professional arrogance that is very off-putting to a lot of people who are just trying to ask questions and build a perspective. And I've seen it from my own personal experience because I'm a curious cat. I like to ask a lot of questions, as you know, Josh.
Sure.
And even some of my very close friends in the medical space, I'll ask questions around, say, masking or vaccinations or social distancing and medical evidence that goes behind it. And they're tired. They're fatigued. They're seeing it every day, especially people who are working on the floors of the hospital. They're seeing people die. They're so fucking over talking about my perception on what I have to wear when I walk into fucking Costco. Excuse my language there, but that's what I'm going to say. And so I get their perspective on it, but also it's like not making it simple enough to meet somebody where they are and then to build a relationship and a rapport and to provide that evidence or provide that dialogue is missing a real opportunity. And it's really bifurcating the conversation as a whole. And we just get more and more divided, to your point earlier. So is there any hope, Josh, for you? Did you design anything in your days at Intermountain that'll just bring us all together under a rainbow?
Well, no, I mean, I will say Intermountain is an incredible healthcare system. All of the health systems I've worked for are full of people that really care about others, and they're trying to do the right thing. What I will say is, there's hope. I do think it's a great point around how do you have a more meaningful dialogue? How do you, and this is one of the hardest things to do. How are you actually negotiating? It's almost a process of negotiation. You think about, so there's lots of books out there that have been written by, former FBI people and former, hostage negotiators. And there's a couple of really popular ones, but that talk about negotiation. And it really is a matter of, letting people come to the conclusion. Maybe it's your conclusion, but come to the conclusion that's right for both of you. And that takes time. We're impatient as a society. It takes time. And it also, I think, takes a certain level of finesse that is really hard. And I don't know generally if we've figured out how to do that yet in the society, is learn how to give people the information and let them come to that decision on their own, or ensure that they know that you're an authority, but that they have a mind of their own, and you're not telling them what to do. You're just offering them, look, this is It's probably something you should consider. It's really hard, really, really hard. But there is hope. I think that much in the way as other fields have made major advancements in the way that they operate, a lot of the science fields and, engineering and medicine,
Yeah.
the communications field will take a similar path. It needs, more advancement in the way that we talk with people. And then it needs to be communication practitioners, I think, should be helping train the medical field, for instance, on how they can communicate with patients that about really sensitive issues, like today the vaccine piece.
Yeah, I think it'd be great. Like, and this is going to be a way oversimplification, but here we go. I'm going to take a shot at solving this problem. I feel like the messaging should be around like, talk to me like I don't know anything.
Yeah.
Or that I have a very elementary level or ability or capacity to understand.
Yep.
Then tell me like I trust you. Then tell me like I don't trust you. And then tell me in a way that encourages me to go figure this out on my own. Yes. And I feel like we try to deliver one message to 4 different archetypes. Maybe there's a lot more archetypes than that, but just, taking a swing at it. Like, I think we're just on a different spectrum of our level of interest to go self-serve information. And if you oversimplify for me, I'm going to distrust you.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to be like, no, that's not that, you're missing the nuance. And then I'll go find the nuance, and then I'll go parrot the nuance instead of the bigger issue, which you had an opportunity to save face on. It's just, you treated me like I was a child.
Yes.
So
yeah. And I wonder how much of this goes back to, our core as a society, at least in this country, to be individualists
and have opinions about everything on social media. Like,
absolutely. We have opinions about everything, man.
I'm an influencer.
You put a picture up of of the meal you had last night and tell you how much that looks like crap, right? Like,
yeah, 100%.
Everybody has an opinion about everything.
Yeah. Why'd you eat there?
What's that?
Why'd you eat there?
Exactly. I'll tell you on one hand, it makes me excited for the opportunity that we can actually advance communication. It'll make, I think, if we can figure out some better ways of encouraging dialogue besides just providing, a platform where you hand both sides sharp knives and say, figure it out.
Yeah.
We've got to be able to figure it out. And now, of course, Facebook has, for example, implemented some of these rules around misinformation and that sort of thing. And as you have looked at, I'm sure with conspiracy theory and that sort of thing, a lot of times when that happens, when they try to retroactively implement those sorts of controls, people see it as part of the larger problem.
Well, hey, dude, there's been people running around Albuquerque, New Mexico with spaceship hats on for 50 years. And this last year, the Air Force or government's like, yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
And so it's like, so when you have it like real life examples that these people have been called crazy their entire lives for things that they've seen or done, have some kind of like probably like extraterrestrial life is like a possibility. Our government spends lots of money to recognize and possibly entertain. Like, oh my God. Yeah. Then how do you not feel like there's truth to just about everything?
Yeah. And that's the other thing is how do you really help have a conversation with people about the nuance and context of different situations. Yeah. And people have, I think it goes back to, I think we generally just like have very little time and energy for learning nuance. And, it's much easier to be a reductionist. And actually, as human beings, I think it's easier for us to live by reducing things to their basic form and sort of, this piece of information fits in this certain, type of box.
I think, here we go. I solved it.
Go for it.
We have to embed inefficiencies in our ability to communicate because the modes of communication are so frictionless. So I think if you're in a position of power, you can only communicate in Old English.
Dude, I love it. Everything's in Latin now.
Yeah. So you have to be very purposeful and think about it and find the right words. And then, here's the decree from on high. And amazing. Here we go. This is what we do, man.
Fantastic.
So what are you working on now, man? I know you pivoted out of the PR, marketing, communication stuff. It sounds like you're doing some innovation in the like the value-based care space. Like how's that going?
It's going well, yeah. So working, so I still do a bit of the marketing piece. It's something called product marketing, which kind of is more on the product side and helping make sure the products are well represented of what's actually happening in the world. And so working for a technology company right now that's doing good work in that. And the one thing that relative to healthcare is, and I think everybody can agree on, is that it needs to be more affordable. It needs to be, we have some really high quality care across the country, but generally we need to be continuously improving the quality of care that's delivered. I'm not a clinician, so the one place I can really tackle that is through interesting products, through communicating, through bringing people together in the right sort of dialogue. And so that's sort of where I focus. They call it value-based care, and value-based care being everything from pay for performance for provider organizations to helping health insurance plans structure themselves around the value of care, and helping consumers understand their own care, that sort of thing. And it's a really tough and it's an emerging space, but it's a really tough space because there's been the structure of healthcare is so complex, number one, and has been there's some really entrenched incentives, and so you have to think about how might you restructure some of those incentives and build products to help enable structure those new incentives so that care is more affordable for everyone and of the highest quality. I don't know that a lot of people listening would know this or not, but high deductible health plans, for example, which many people that work at companies have, are what are commonly referred to as consumer directed health plans, because you as a consumer are incurring a lot of the front end cost of care at the beginning of the plan year, right? So, maybe your deductible is $10,000, right? So for that $10,000, you're gonna have to figure out how to spend it. There's been a lot of research around, do those work? People are spending a lot of money here? Do they really understand how to navigate the healthcare space? And, are they getting the right care? Do they know how to discern between quality? Like are they able to do the right things for themselves and their families? And I think that the consensus is it's done okay, but we need to be better. And so value-based care is ultimately getting providers on the same page as consumers / patients, on the same page as health plans, on the same page as employers, so that the entire ecosystem of healthcare is working towards something better.
Yeah. And I wonder, and I've wondered this for years. And again, a lot of people who listen to this podcast don't know, I've spent the majority of my career working in the healthcare space, done work for hospitals and health systems, and been very interested in the model of healthcare and healthcare delivery in general. So something I have spent quite a bit of time studying across my career. I always grappled with is it the model that's broken, or is it the understanding of the individual how to exist within the model that's broken? Like if you went to a train station and, everything worked about the train station, the trains went to where they were going, all this different stuff, but the destinations and the times were really hard to find. It's like the model works, except for the critical information that you need to navigate that environment. It requires a bunch of double clicking to get to, and then you have to find a guy and know a guy. So then you have a bunch of people who are stranded, that are frustrated, that are sitting there with luggage, that missed their train, that don't know where to go. And then you have some people that are like, oh, this is easy to do. I go to Denmark all the time. Like I just hop on here and go. And I've always kind of felt like that with the healthcare system. I felt like the gap is in the education to navigate, regardless of what the system is. Yep. And as we've had philosophical discussions, whether you or I or folks that we kind of have a cocktail somewhere and talk about these types of problems in healthcare, I don't know how to close that gap. I don't know how to make it simple enough so that
Yeah.
people can navigate it and get the most value out of whatever system, regardless if it's value-based care or fee for service or, whatever it is.
It's a great point. I love your analogy, by the way. I think it's really smart, and it's like the system today. I think in your analogy, the train station was built for the trains and not for the people riding in the trains.
Well said. Absolutely.
Yeah, so when you build the train system for the trains, you're completely leaving out the voice and view and perspective of your customer or your train passenger. And I guess the question is it possible that something as complex as medicine can be restructured, and the payment for medicine can be restructured in a way that is human centered, that is person centered? And I think it's possible. I think it is absolutely possible. It's going to take time, and people are going to have to shift the way that they do things. And I'm really happy to see a lot of new entrants into the healthcare space because they bring certain perspectives that I don't know if have really been around. I saw a similar thing back when I was in media, right? Where you had, this is the way that we do things. We built it for the system, and we continue building things for the system. Where you have these new entrants that come in and say, we're going to kind of flip the table on that.
Yeah.
And
Screw your
build it
system.
for the customer. Yeah, you need to build for the customer. You need to be where they are. You need to meet them where they're at. And so with healthcare, it's going to take a long time. I mean, with media, it took many years. They thought TV was going to kill radio. It didn't. They thought that, the radio was going to kill newspaper. It didn't. But now I would say that a lot of the new ways of how we consume media have completely shifted the dynamic. And I actually think healthcare is going to take even longer to do that. We've gotten better in some areas, but man, how do you actually you can't really bulldoze the train station because people still need to get from one place to another. So how do you reconfigure the train station without bulldozing it?
Yeah. And as a consumer of healthcare, how do you manage an expectation for a system that you don't trust today to become a system that you will trust in the future?
Yes.
And, so you're just sitting there saying like, I'm frustrated. I don't like this system, blow this whole thing up. But if you were building a bridge, you would build the new bridge next to the old bridge.
Yes.
and then you would get rid of or repair the old bridge, and then you would cross it, right? You wouldn't just not cross the bridge for a while.
That's a great way to put it. And I think that's exactly what these new entrants are doing in healthcare, and a lot of the entrenched companies are doing. I mean, they're realizing we have to adapt or we're not going to be around. And what they're doing is they're taking they're taking components of healthcare and some of the pieces and parts and says, we can get really good at this. They're building the new bridge off to the side. And eventually the old bridge is either going to be, demolished, or it's going to be repaired. And then you can have two bridges that are both operating simultaneously. So,
well, I'm looking forward to a world where, when you're driving by, you can see the artifacts of the old railway or the old roadway sitting there on the side. And hopefully we can kind of reflect on a future state that we can extract real value out of the system, understand how it works, make it work simply, make it work fair and equitably across people with all kinds of different needs, backgrounds, values, preferences, all that good
totally.
stuff.
And that's another great point, is in that, I think people have seen healthcare as something that is very much what happens inside the walls of a clinical environment. And I think that there's increasing recognition that health is encapsulates a person's entire life, right? Their socioeconomic status, their access to transportation, their access to food.
What was the hot one? Social determinants was the hot word for a while.
Determinants. Yeah. That's a big one. And where they're a big one that I know that's been faced recently is just around, and the word social is a good one for this, but your social network and loneliness is a huge problem, for example, in the elderly population. So how do you address loneliness? It's not by going to the hospital, which, by the way, happens. There are people that will go to the hospital because they want to talk to somebody and they're lonely.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do you fix that? That's not a doctor visit problem. So there's a lot of non-clinicians that can have an impact on the way healthcare is delivered too. So it's kind of an exciting time.
Speaking of loneliness, folks listening, most of them don't know this. You and I We were in a cover band together.
Yes,
We were getting a little band going, had some good friends in that group as well. And then you moved away, Josh. You moved
no,
away
I
from
know.
Boise and it all fell apart. And I have a lot of animosity towards you for that
Well,
experience.
I think what people don't know is we actually played covers of Weird Al Yankovic songs, full album, deep cuts.
So come on now.
No, no,
I
no, it
know.
wasn't. It was no, man. We were
Dude,
doing.
Albuquerque, we did a full the full version for instead of 9 minutes, we made it 22.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. No, but no, we were playing 90s rock music. But yeah, dude, I miss doing that stuff. I mean, I guess we wouldn't have been playing any shows in the last 2 years anyway, right?
You know, I have actually never thought about it like that. I've just harbored resentment for you, but I but I guess when we're talking about it practically, yeah, you're right. It's not like we gave up on a lot of gigs.
I know, man. I know. Well, I will say that if ever we get a band back together, we will have to do some deep cuts on Weird Al.
Oh God,
I'm
yeah, absolutely.
thinking, Amish Paradise would be a good one.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm there. I'm here for
Yeah,
it. 100%.
rock
And
and
then
roll.
hey, lastly, man, you got a little one at home.
I do. Yeah,
That was something you had one of them COVID babies, but I think,
did.
yeah, let's talk about that. What's that fatherhood experience like?
Well, first of all, I didn't do much of when it comes to the work of actually having a kid.
I didn't want to assume.
Yeah. No, she's awesome, man. She's a year old now, and
It's incredible.
she's so cool. I mean, as every parent will say, it changes your life completely and totally. And I have a lot of friends that I'm sure you do too that say, well, I'm not going to have kids, and I actually totally respect that. I completely get it. It's a great thing to have in your life, though, as you well know, having two, right?
Yeah. 8 and 6
Um,
now.
oh my gosh, that's nuts.
It's wild.
Yeah, it's so cool, and having done that during COVID, I will say that if there was ever a silver lining to what happened in the pandemic, it was that I was home, I was able to see her a lot more than I probably would have, and I think that there's people were actually, I think, a little bit more considerate around getting other people sick, and so maybe she wasn't sick as often, that sort of thing. So I think there were some good aspects to it as well. But otherwise, I mean, it's just so much fun, and I'm also really tired, so I'm enjoying that.
Oh, beautiful, man. I tell you what, that time with kiddo, like I was in 2013. That's when my son was born. I still traveled for a year after he was born. I saw him about 70 days his first year of being alive on this planet. And though, you know, that was the job that I was doing, that's what I signed up for. Like, that's just the negative externalities of what happens as I reflect on that
Yep.
first year, man. Even though you can't get it back, those are some of the times that you want back for sure. That connection, that experience. And I'm thankful I get to be home all the time now. I get to spend so much time with my kids and be at the games and those types of things. But to be able to spend that much time with your little one in the first year of life, what a gift. And I appreciate that silver lining.
Yeah, man, it's been great, and we'll have to get the kiddos together, and it'll be fun.
Yeah, absolutely, my brother. Well, hey man, I want to thank you for carving out the time today, hopping on the podcast, just having some strings of consciousness around communications and healthcare and COVID, and those are big topics, man. And there's not a lot of people that I would pick up the phone and call to get their viewpoint and opinion in such a level-headed and informative fashion like yourself. And so I appreciate you, brother, man. Thank you so much for hopping on.
Goes both ways, man. Thanks for having me on, and yeah, until next time.
All right. Best to you, brother.